All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I am having to talk and also admit people out from in the waiting room at the same time. So if I seem like I'm patting my head and rubbing my belly, I am. My name is Camus Davis. I'm the executive director of the Good Meat Project. We are a national nonprofit located here in Oregon. I'm in Portland, Oregon currently. We are a national nonprofit whose mission is to build pathways toward responsible meat production and consumption. And we do that through a couple of different methods. We share knowledge, as we're going to do today at the Sunday session, and skills as well. We build coalitions of consumers, of meat producers, of food professionals, and we do whatever we need to do to empower change makers all along the meat supply chain. We came up with the Sunday sessions in the process of building a resource called the Good Meat Breakdown, which if you all go to the goodmeatbreakdown.org and you haven't already, check it out. We built that resource at first to really educate consumers on how to find, buy, and cook good meat, especially how to find and buy meat that they can, or find and buy meat from people like you, people who sell directly to consumers. And through the process of building that, we surveyed and talked to a lot of producers who really expressed interest in wanting to learn from one another, and to try and figure out, are there ways that we can share knowledge and skills? Are there also ways we can share vocabulary around what we sell? Are there ways we can share messaging, especially in the sort of the end user realm, the marketing realm? And so the idea behind the Sunday sessions really is to explore not so much the production side, but the demand side, the sales side, and how we actually find buyers for our meat. So today we'll be obviously exploring one of those sales side models. Normally we have two hosts, Alex Miller and Megan Lannon. Today Megan won't be joining us, so Alex is our only host today, and I'm going to let Alex introduce himself. But before he does that, I just want to say, throughout this conversation that Alex and Dan are going to have, please feel free to comment in the chat, to put questions. I will be feeding Alex questions in the background that he'll ask Dan for you. So please feel free at any point to put a question in the chat. Also, if there's resources that come up or information that you want to share that's relevant to the conversation, please feel free to put that in the chat as well. We want to make sure that this is a place where you all are sharing information. If you need anything, if you have any technical difficulties, you can click on the chat icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen and just find me, Camus, and you can message me directly and I can help you out. So I'm going to pass off the mic to Alex and to Dan. Let me get you spotlighted here.
Thanks,
all right,
Camus.
go ahead. Yep.
Let me introduce myself. I'm Alex Miller. I'm a CEO at Lick Skillet Farm. It's a family farm, Century Family Farm in East Tennessee, located at the base of the Smoky Mountains. We do beef, pork, lamb, and poultry, all pastured, sold direct to consumers. We also, I'll add this bit tonight because it's especially relevant. We also sell through an aggregator. So our plan A is to sell most of our stuff, most of our products through our own brand, but we also have a relationship with Hickory Nut Gap, which is an aggregator based in Asheville, North Carolina, and they have suppliers from producers like us from probably, I'm going to guess, about 5 states, and they're probably selling back into even more states than that. So if you're interested, Google Hickory Nut Gap and see what Jamie and his folks are doing. They run a great organization. Tonight's program is focused on selling to aggregators as opposed to selling direct. And our guest is Dan Flitner. Dan is a 4th-generation rancher. He and his wife, Mary, operate the 4 Lazy F Ranch, 500 acres in Terrebonne, Oregon, where they produce some of the finest grass-fed beef and excellent working cattle horses in the Pacific Northwest. Before 2006, Dan was instrumental in founding the Sweetgrass Co-op. It was a network of family farms producing grass-fed beef in the New Mexico, Colorado area. Then he moved to Oregon And in 2016, he joined the Carman Ranch Provisions and became one of their suppliers, one of the producer suppliers. Carman Ranch sells direct to the public through individual purchases, consumer purchases, and also grocery stores and restaurants. So we'll be talking to Dan about his experience with aggregators. Dan, welcome to the show. Glad to have you.
Yeah, thanks. Glad to be here.
Good. So you've had a wide range of experiences in the co-op aggregator realm. Why don't we just start out with some basic definitions, Dan, and tell us in your own words, what is an aggregator? What do they do? How's the model work? Those sorts of things.
Well, for me personally, an aggregator is a partner. I want to make that clear. I don't think that's always the case, but for us, it's a partner. It's somebody that to help you move your product to a bigger market and maybe move more of your product to a bigger market. So that's been our goal and our use of an aggregator is to get more animals sold. It's been a struggle for us to do the direct to consumer thing for some reason. So we've been real happy with the aggregator that I helped develop in New Mexico and also the Carman Ranch here in Oregon.
Now, the one in New Mexico, Sweetgrass, that was structured as a co-op. What's the structure of Carman Ranch and what are the differences, and are the differences meaningful?
Yeah, I think they are meaningful. The co-op was basically a nonprofit, right? So we formed, there was 7 or 8 of us that, I don't know, maybe we had too much to drink and we got together and formed this thing. But the idea was to funnel money back to the producers that were there in the beginning and started the thing, and also keep it fair in price so that any profits went back to producers instead of one company or one person, as a company making the profits. Carman Ranch is an LLC. I feel like they are a valuable partner, but it is not a co-op. So she's got her own business plan and own model that is not.
She being Corey Carman.
Correct. And it's a great team. It's not just Corey, obviously. I refer to it's Corey Carman is the owner, but it's Carman Ranch and it's a conglomerate of investors and she's the CEO. Let's leave it at that. So yeah, different, it's a different model. Our model is more of a community. It's more of it's just a different business model.
Yeah. So, and in between New Mexico, then moving to Oregon, it looks like you had about a 10-year period where you weren't participating with an aggregator program. What made you decide to go back to the aggregator? What's your story there, and what did you consider, and what finally led you to conclude, you wanted to participate again with an aggregator?
Well, so I think a couple of things that happened there. I think we got our date. So, but there was probably a 6. Yeah, I mean, those are just details. So when we moved to Oregon, we didn't have an aggregator, and we sold a lot of cows in New Mexico before we moved up here. So we kind of started from scratch. So I actually sold calves the first 2 or 3 years here to an aggregator that I wanted to work with in the future. So it was before Carman Ranch. And we did sell a little bit of direct to consumer, but not much. We were busy trying to get our ranch running, so that's kind of the void. The moving pace and then the lack of numbers. We only had about 25 calves that first year, and we got up to close to 200 and now we're over 200. Yeah. So it's not like we changed models. It was just trying to get our feet on the ground.
So what I hear you saying is you always had the intention to go back to the aggregator model. It just took you a while to get all that in place once you moved.
Correct.
Okay. So what do you find so appealing about selling through aggregators? And you've mentioned a couple of times that the direct to consumer didn't work very well for you, but on the aggregator side, my sense is that you're finding a lot of success and lots of things that draw you in that direction?
There's a couple of things, even with the aggregator we have now with Carman Ranch, there's some great producers involved. So I really like the community in the ag industry and the beef industry. So we get to share ideas at our annual, quarterly meetings, and we have a certain amount of input in price and this. It doesn't necessarily we're listened to, but I really like the community piece. So amongst producers. So, and I felt like that with the co-op. That was part of the reason we started it in New Mexico. It was like, man, we need to figure out how to get more access to processing or more access to markets, or, hey, this grocery store needs X amount of head. We can't do it on our own. Can we do it together? And, I've grown up, I grew up feeding cattle bigger numbers. I'm used to running, we'd feed 1,000 head of cows in a feedlot and do it, so I'm used to that kind of scale of doing things. And it seems like for us, when I got down to trying to do freezer beef, I was chasing quarter beef customers all over the countryside. I couldn't figure out my costs other than they were high. And it kind of drove me crazy. So, and I think that's a personal thing. Some people are really good at that. I'm just not. We do a little bit of it, but they have to come find me because I'm not. I don't know. I just don't have that figured out.
Right. You mentioned there the quarterly meetings and the interchange between producers. Could you talk more about how all that works? What takes place at a quarterly meeting? Who runs it? Who attends? That's different. I don't have that experience at Hickory Nut Gap. We have annual meetings. But.
Sure. Carman Ranch does a biannually, or even sometimes it's quarterly meeting. At least once a year, it will be at some producer that sells in aggregator. So we will meet. It won't be this year. We meet here, but probably next year. Last year we met up in Washington at some producers up there. We bring in those ideas. We get to share ideas, and then she being Carman Ranch, or they being Carman Ranch, they give us an idea of where all our beef is going. There will be some representative from some of the buyers of Carman Ranch beef there, so there is a link to the actual last stop for the beef that we sell there, which is nice. So I guess that's important to me.
Right. Yeah. It sounds like it would be now, and those meetings are convened by Carman. Is that
correct?
So they're running the meetings, and do they report out as well in those meetings on their operations, or is it more just interchange between the producers and then connecting the producers with the customers?
No, I'm sorry. It's completely transparent. So we look at the whole business costs and expense, cash flows, and then market who's buying most of their beef or our beef, and so it's very transparent where they'd like to go, what their successes have been for the year, what their struggles have been, etc. And then once a year we'll meet, in about 2 weeks we'll meet in Portland. Our Carman Ranch's biggest buyer, which is New Seasons, which is a retail store in Portland, will be part of that meeting. We will probably do some demos in the stores while we're there for half a day or something. So that'll be the kind of retailer piece. There'll be some other restaurants there. We'll probably eat at one of the restaurants that buys our beef.
Cool. That sounds like a really instructive and constructive sort of meeting. I'm impressed with the amount of effort that must go into organizing all that. Could you talk a little bit more about the range of customers and the range of products that Carman is dealing with, just so we get a full picture there of what the aggregator is involved in?
Sure. So Carman Ranch, they are currently taking 50 head a week for all of the weeks of the year, at 40 to 50 head. Those animals are sold probably 60% to retail, maybe more. It could probably, last I looked, it might even been more, of which that retail is New Seasons Market, which is kind of a Northwest store. And then also some Northwestern, restaurants. There are a few customers as far back east as New York, where some pallet loads go all the way back east to specialty restaurants and stuff like that. I'm trying to think. Yeah, that's the big, that's kind of it. They haven't done any pick kind of, crowd cow or green chef type of models. They're not doing anything like it's a retail or restaurant type of arbiter. Sorry.
Yep. Good. Can you talk, based on all that, can you talk any about the economics of producing and selling into an aggregator versus alternative? You've got a lot of experience in the economics of this business, all the way from feeding yourself to direct to consumer yourself. So talk some about the economics and what your costs are like and what it's like economically to sell into an aggregator versus selling on the open market.
Sure. So for us, and I think this is important for wherever you are, right? Our aggregator, they are very supportive of, it's a producer-driven aggregator. The CEO is a producer in the business as well. She sells some of her own animals to the aggregator. So we have a certain amount of, I don't want to say leverage, but we do feel like partners to a certain extent. And I feel like that's very important. Kind of bring me back on track here, Alex. I got off there a little.
The economics of selling, producing and selling this way, as opposed to other models that you've experienced with.
Yeah, my apologies. So
No problem.
right currently now, I'm hoping this fall we're going to end up at $3.25 per hanging weight. So on a 650 or 640 pound carcass, that's going to be at $250 or $2,050 a head deal. Our costs, I did a break even on that. I might be getting too specific, but we're going to have about $1,600 in those animals. So our ranch is going to net roughly $400. Now I can go through all the details of all that and do a better job, but selling through the aggregator, we're going to do $400. Now I'm used to doing 25 in the feed yard years ago and selling our feed. And I am selling some feed. We charge $1.15 for every pound we put on that animal. So we are, through our farm, selling our feed through these animals. So the little bit of a feed sales there, but that's got to cover labor, water, et cetera, et cetera. So when you take that, so say it's $2,000 a head, I'm sure if I was selling direct to consumer, I could do well over $3,000. But there's another $1,000 in processing in Oregon right now for USDA processing, plus delivery and all the marketing and all the things that go along with it. And so I just I'm not comfortable taking that on at this point. But that's kind of the lay of the land for us.
Yeah, and if you were selling into normal commercial feedlot sorts of markets and seeing those animals fed, do we say that the current fat hanging price now is $232? I think is that what you told me?
That same animal at that same weight would bring about $1,500.
Yeah,
right.
Less than your cost to produce it.
Right.
Go back though, if you would, because I think that probably you're doing some things in your accounting that not everybody does, and I think they're probably smart. You were talking about charging for the weight that you put on and selling feed in that way. Explain what that means.
Okay, well, I'll start with, I start with a 900, like this year I started with a $900 5-weight. So an opportunity cost at $900 to, I could sell that animal in October for $900, right? Weighing 500 pounds, say, just for rough numbers. So the ranch basically took on that cost of $900 by not selling it. So then we want to get to say 1,150 to 1,200 pounds on our animals. That's kind of where we like to be low choice, high select. So say 640 pounds at 55 to 56% yield. To get to that weight, that's 650 pounds. We charge $1.15 for every pound we put on that animal. And sometimes it's paid outright to another producer that has some forage. So it's $1 to $1.15 out of our pocket. And then the 300 to 400 pounds that we put on here, it's still, that's that $1.15 covers our labor, our water costs, our power bill, the cost of doing business.
And that's your opportunity cost. If you weren't fattening yours, you could be fattening somebody else's at $1.15. So you got to charge that. Right.
Or whatever.
Good.
Correct.
Good. All right. I thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing all those numbers. That's very useful. Now, as part of an aggregator, you work in order for Carman Ranch Provisions to sell a branded product. They need to have consistency of input. That means that all of the producers need to adhere to some common protocols. About how many producers are part of the Carman Ranch network? Is it about 10 or so?
I would say 10. Yes.
Okay, so about 10. So the 10 of you have to have common protocols. Can you describe those protocols and how they get discussed and how they get agreed upon?
Yeah. So, it's an all natural, 100% grass fed product, right? So you start there and you work your way out. And honestly, it's just kind of assume that we're going to get there with the right kind of animal, and we do. I mean, we're expected to get our animals finished, but there's some inconsistencies. I'm not going to lie and tell you that everybody's shipping the same kind of cattle, but with the group of 10, they keep a pretty good eye on what's going on. And if somebody's cattle are doing a little bit better, they'll move. Like last year, our cattle moved it earlier into the schedule because they were doing a little better, but it's not as big of a thing with them as maybe it should be in my mind. But also, it's been my experience with aggregators that you can get hung up on these details, and it is an important detail. Don't misunderstand me. But when you're the aggregator, you've got a bottom line there to meet, and you've got a demand that you've got to meet. And your job is to take those animals and sort that load and figure out which piece can go where to make it work, because a leaner animal might work better for some buyers and not as well for others. So that's their job, is to figure that out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And right now, you're not participating in any third-party certification programs, correct?
We just started in the process with Gabe Brown's certification process. I think our ranch is going to be audited in June. And I can't say the name of that. I'm sorry.
It's more of a soil health and regenerative agriculture. It's not so much animal welfare or feeding practices. It's what you do for regenerative. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
And that's the Carman Ranch, going to be a Carman Ranch requirement. I mean, part of their mission vision is soil health is a huge thing to them, and improving the quality of the land. So that's why they're putting that in there, and they're going to use it to market, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. Just for comparison, for the folks in the audience and folks watching this in the archives, I want to compare that to the aggregator lick scale it sells into, which is Hickory Nut Gap. There is a third-party certifier, and everyone's expected to be GAP 4 certified. That's so that Hickory Nut can sell into Whole Foods and other customers of theirs that expect that GAP 4. And so that means during COVID, once a year, normally it would be once every 15 months, we get a third party come in and look at our animal welfare practices. We're not certified for 100%. No, nobody's checking that we're organic. Nobody's checking that certifying or any of those practices. But the protocols spell out no GMOs, no feeds of any kind to cattle, no hormones. And then beyond that, the welfare, animal welfare and humane treatment of animals, which is pretty strict for GAP 4. And it's a sign on a dotted line. Every time you send in a shipment of cattle, you're signing that you're in compliance with those. And then you get a third party compliance as well. On the other hand, that's only for cattle. We don't have any sort of protocols for beyond the ones that we have for our own farm, because we don't sell our pork, lamb, or chicken into any networks. The only protocols we have are our own that we've set forward for our own board, and then we have to hold ourselves accountable for that. So that's one of the things that has to be struck here is this. If you're going to be part of a network, you got to be part of a network, and it comes with some pluses and minuses and different levels of governance as those are enforced. So it is, at least for us, it's another cost of doing business. Whether or not it would be hard pressed for us to document, and that business, that third party certification is paid off in this way. I don't know that I could do it right now, and I think it'd be really interesting to see the economic justification for Carman to get the soil health certification, because that's a very different approach and very different sales proposition when you take that to your consumers. So I want to watch that and see how all that goes for you. Back on those protocols, just some real pragmatic questions. So given the protocols you have, that allows you to buy stocker calves if they're coming from the right kind of operation. And about how many of your cattle were raised from your own cow-calf herd versus stockers that you brought in?
Right now, 50%. So we're going to sell 200 this fall. 100 of those, or not quite 100, will be purchased. And I like being able to do that. I trust Carman Ranch is going to hold my feet to the fire and make sure that, they know my management well enough. They know what kind of cattle we produce. They kind of trust us as producers. And I do want to make it clear, there are those protocols like, no GMOs, no
right.
hormones, that is there. I didn't state that, but for
no,
sure.
I assume that's what you meant when you said all natural. I'm just spelling it out. Right.
So, but we can, like with the GAP 4, you can't do that. And that's kind of crippling if you've got an opportunity. Like right now, we had to destock. We've been dry. We needed to sell some cows. I'd rather sell our own calves through the program, but we didn't have the cow numbers. And so it was like, oh, what if I can't fill those deliveries? Then I lose those deliveries to some other producer. So it's very nice to be able to do that and be trusted. Right. Know that we're going to send them a good load of cattle.
And so for anyone listening in on this conversation who's not familiar with GAP 4, let me go back and explain something Dan just said. GAP 4 says that you or another certified producer has been in control of these animals from the day that they were born. So under GAP 4, we're not allowed to do what Dan was just talking about, buy stocker cattle. Now we can run two different herds, but then it gets to be, there has to be very clear delineation of those two, and they have to be marketed separately, have to be identified separately, and it gets to be a challenge. So we can't sell anything under the GAP 4 certification that wasn't born and raised on our place. Because right now we haven't found anyone who wants to participate with us, any suppliers that would sell us stocker cattle that are willing to incur the cost of the GAP 4 certification. Ours is through earth claims, and I believe it's $1,000 a year is what they're currently doing. So it is a cost of doing business. So do you think that balance that you're currently sitting at 50-50, those that you produce and those that you buy. Is that about where you want to be? Are you happy keeping that many cows, or are you tempted to lean more towards stockers?
You know, I like our cattle so much better than what I can buy. I'd rather.
I've seen pictures of your cattle. I know what you're talking about.
And we're very good at what we do. So we've been able to buy stockers, and we manage really well, and they do really well, and they do well for Carman, and they do well for us. But our cattle they're just that much better. And
yeah.
So if I could find a producer to do what we do close to that, I'd be okay with that. It's hard to find those guys. You know, most of these guys are running Sam Angus cattle that are huge, and our cows are 1,200 pounds. That's a huge cow not a huge cow, but that's a big cow for this ranch.
Yeah, I know what you mean. That's the whole, if you're either tailored to give the commercial feeders what they want, or give the grass finishers what they want. And there aren't many that are set up to supply us grass finishers. That's just not the mindset. So it's a real challenge. We've got a couple of neighbors that have some moderate frame cattle and go all natural, but even they're not ready to bite the bullet and get certified at this point. So building our own aggregating so that we can sell it to an aggregator is a step that we've not quite mastered yet, but I think that's where it's coming. When we run the economics, we like the calves that we raise, but we're able to buy some pretty good calves too if we could just get over this hump of the certification. Right now, if we buy them, we know that every animal we buy has to be sold under our brand, because our brand's not claiming GAP4. That's only the Hickory Nut brand that's coming. So it's a needle to be threaded. So,
Yeah.
So in this relationship that you have with the aggregator, you and the other 9 producers are all selling to a reasonable protocol. Are you getting is there a feedback loop built into this so that you see how your cattle do, how your individual cattle do? Were you able to get that level of detail? What's that look like?
We've actually been getting, up until the last 12 to 15 months, we were actually getting our cattle graded. So we had that. We're not getting that as much, but it's interesting. Carman Ranch has done such a good job following how they sell their carcasses. They can kind of tell you what kind of cattle load, what kind of cattle you sent by what's happening with the numbers. So we always get that feedback. We're very fortunate. Our cattle always, they do really well.
But I assume there was an extra cost of getting your carcasses graded. Did that stop just because of the cost, or is it just a matter of an added step to have to get somebody there to grade them? What led to that stopping?
The processor just was sick of it. Those guys are so busy and so labor pinched right now that he was just like, I want to do this. I can't offer the resources.
Have you suffered like everybody else in the country with finding processing capacity, or is one of the benefits of being part of this aggregator model that you've got better access to processing?
I think we have better access to processing, and it's not my problem.
Yeah.
That's the nice thing about this. It's like, hey, you figure it out.
So what's your commitment then as far as ship dates and that sort of thing to Carman? Do you promise so many head on so many at such and such a time, and then that's that?
Our loads are scheduled a year in advance. So we'll sell a load in September, October, and 2 in December. I think our loads are going to gradually get moved up earlier out of December, just because they're going to be ready sooner than some others. But we know that, like this year, we're going to sell 50 head truckloads 4 times this fall.
Yeah, and then if that's somebody else's problem to find the processing date, and that's really got to be for for those of us who still suffer with trying to arrange processing dates on small loads, I can tell you that's a big headache that you're avoiding. You know that all too well. So with this model, how do you share the risk between markets moving up dramatically and markets moving down dramatically? Are there covenants built into your relationship? It sounds like everything is done basically on a handshake and good faith. What do you do if the markets move in either direction?
Well, typically we talk price in the fall. Last year, we actually started talking price in the spring. So it's kind of become a twice a year subject. When Carman Ranch first got started, we let her or them set the price fairly low. It was $260 for up until this year. And I think a lot of the reason that we didn't push harder is we've all, several of us in this organization or producers have been through this before and understand their position. So it's like, you know, we're willing to hang in there for a while. This year we got a bump up to 3.25, I think, by this fall. So that's going to help us a lot. And I think whether it's enough or not, I don't know, but I'm certainly, our thought is that as a producer, mine is that price is going to have to hold longer. So we don't adjust every time the price moves. It's set once a year, and they've got to figure, you know, Carman Ranch and her team, they've got to figure out how to do that. We haven't been asked to take a decrease yet, but we haven't had many increases either. So I think we're getting there. But I to be honest, I'm okay with that. It was a little tight at 260. Your cattle had to do pretty well, and you had to keep your costs down. But we were okay, and it is a handshake. It's a leap of faith. I feel very fortunate to have the kind of relationship that I do with this organization, and I'm confident that they are gonna to hold to their word, and I'm gonna make sure I do also.
Yeah, good. So Zach in the audience is listening in to us. Send in a message in chat. And by the way, those of you in the audience, please shoot us your questions, and Camus will get those bundled together and we'll get them asked. But Zach asked the question, well, if the aggregator is running his or her own cattle into the mix, is there any problem there with conflict of interest where the aggregator is putting their own cattle sort of ahead of the others, and they're thinking about how those are going to be dealt with? How do you how is Carman the first among equals, or just really one of the equals in the network?
Both. I don't feel like I'm not worried. So to be honest, I don't feel like that she's or they are they're getting a better deal as far as deliveries than we are. I can't afford to go down that road.
Yeah.
I think you can always, hard enough, you're going to find something. And I don't feel like there's anything underhanded going on there. It feels good. So just be careful who you get into business with. You know, I think that's it. Hey, it's just like anything else. If you don't, you know, trust your partner, don't do it.
Well, for anyone listening to this, I think that's a lesson from Dan right there to take away and underline. I mean, the margins in this business, even in the best circumstances, are thin enough that we can't afford to start layering on a bunch of bureaucracy and double checking and all that sort of thing. We sold, just a quick story along those lines. We sold some cattle. I won't name the grass finisher who bought them, but there was some Wall Street money behind it, and we sold them the first load that they bought. And the rancher called us up and said, hey, I got a real problem. Said the investors behind this deal want to know why the cattle weigh 10% less today than you claimed that they weighed when you shipped them. I said it probably has something to do with shrink, And the fact that your guy wasn't there to receive them and they spent the night on the truck might have contributed to that. And his comment was, well, that will never happen again. We will always have somebody there when your cattle are weighed. And I said, and you'll go bankrupt doing it too, because they were weighed on a certified scale and we live 200 miles from you and you can't afford to drive 200 miles to see somebody weigh cattle on a certified scale. The whole thing just blew apart at that point because it didn't have that trust that you were talking about. We couldn't look each other in the eye and say, we trust you. Simple as that. There was just no trust there, and it just fell apart very quickly. And that's unfortunate. But I think that that's just the way this industry has to work. There's just not enough money to pay the accountants and the lawyers to make sure that we're on the up and up. So I've got a question here from Angie. Let me. Are your calves sold as one of? Okay, so it's talking about the way you're selling your cattle, and you talked about this before. You have. Repeat it one more time. You have how many truckloads and what's the timing that they sell during the year?
We sell 4 50-head truckloads, so 200 head. There'll be a load in September, a load late September, early October, I can't remember which, and then 2 loads in December.
Great. All right. Let's move toward lessons learned. So you give some general advice based on your experience. What are the questions that a small producer, and remember, many of the folks in our audience will be where you were when you had those 25 head and were trying to figure out how to sell them. So for a small producer thinking about selling to an aggregator, what are the questions you think they ought to be asking, and what are the warning signs they ought to be looking for? Those sorts of things. Share your lessons learned with us, Dan.
I think it's important to know where your arbitrator where they're selling, what their market is. You need a relationship. I think this is a small target business, the grass-fed beef world. It's not hard to figure out what people are doing. I think your buyer needs to be in a position where they can share that information with you. There's too much risk to go. And I mean, you can, if you're looking at our business going, holy smokes, you've got a lot of risk out there, and you're absolutely right. So you have to have trust. You have to have somebody you can trust that you need to know where your beef is going and how it's being sold. Because I have personally seen grass-fed beef businesses that want your animals and will take your animals, and then they start trickling out how they pay, and they're selling lots of ribeyes, but your ground beef's sitting in a freezer somewhere, and all of a sudden they can't pay. And so you just, ask those questions about what their inventory levels are, what their market is. It's a small world. I feel like, I don't know, Alex, I feel like I could go to Portland tomorrow and start poking around and get a pretty good vibe of how Carman Ranch is being received in the retail market in Portland. But you got to be able to trust your buyer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you can't find out information, don't do it. Start your own.
And so that would be one of the things that would cause you to walk away from it, would be just a lack of trust and a lack of confidence. What are there any other things you'd be looking for that would say, okay, that's it, I'm out?
Money.
Comes down to that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's been tight for us, but we've been able to make it work. And Carman Ranch has still been above some of these other companies that are no longer in business that we're buying it for less. So, it's got to pay the bills for you. You can't just do it because it feels good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also, I would say from the small business, really figure out your costs if you're going direct to the consumer, because my whole issue there was it was really hard for me to know those costs, to learn that. I knew what it was costing to raise it. I knew what it was cost to process it, but getting those animals delivered was costing us a lot of money. and a lot of headache. And that's why we went the way we went.
Yeah, is not just your cost, but also figure out what the market will bear and pricing and be willing to charge it. That's I think both of those are challenges for a lot of producers. They see what conventionally produced meat is selling for and think that they've got to match that, and the cost structure just won't allow it to be done in any sort of sustainable way. So that's good. We probably ought to do a program just addressing those issues, and maybe Camus, let's put that on the list of programs to consider in the future. I was struck, though. I want to go back to something you said earlier about when I said what drew you to the aggregator. The first thing out of your mouth was not any of this, the economics or anything. It was the ability to be part of a group of really strong other producers that you can network with and have an interchange with. I think that's really important, and I suspect it's fairly rare. Did you have that same sort of thing? Did you build that into the co-op down in Mexico, or is that new and different with Carman?
No, we built that. We built that from the ground up. That was part of it.
Yeah.
You know, I think for me, I'm fourth generation. So, man, without my neighbors and my peers and my community, I don't feel good on the ground. So, you know, these biannual or quarterly meetings, getting with these guys after you've been knee deep in the crap and talking new ideas and getting yourself dusted off and getting a new perspective from other people, and, you know, learning through other people's mistakes and them learning through yours and sharing ideas. You know, I mean, who can tell you in ag or in the cattle business that it's all been about the money in 4 generations? Because it's, yeah, of course we want to be more profitable all the time, but I don't work this hard because of the money, because there's way better to make money.
Yeah. Well, in my own experience, I have a group of I'm in a group of 6 producers where we sit as informal board members for one another. And I think we get a lot of the same benefit out of that group as what you're talking about. But for me, one of the most important things is you've got a group of people that'll tell you when you're crazy and tell you when you're not crazy. And I got lots of neighbors that will tell me I'm crazy, but it's crazy for doing stuff that's just different from what they do. And I think there's actually some real important benefits. It's who was it? Was it Greg Jeter? I forget who it says that if you're doing what your neighbor's doing, you can count on it's probably the wrong thing to be doing. Well, I've got lots of neighbors that tell me I'm wrong for not doing what they're doing. And I've got this informal board that will say, no, that might work. On the other hand, they'll be the first ones to throw the BS flag and say, no, that idea is half baked. You got to go back and rethink that's just not a good idea. And I think having that sort of personal connection with some other producers who you respect is really valuable and way too rare. So I'm glad to see that you've baked that into the co-op, and then you've been able to find it at Carman Ranch as well. If you suddenly inherited another 1,000 acres, all right, triple the size of your operation, let's say some big number like this, would you do anything differently? Just you've reached a scale now where the aggregator model is working for you. Would you have to change if you kept growing, or is this scalable to a really big operation?
I think we make some adjustments if we picked up another 1,000 acres. I think this is scalable to a point, but it's not 10% a year. You know, I mean, we were 160 last year, or we're 200 this year, but that's been it's not just year to year. That's been a long time coming, right? So, I think we'd have to find another buyer. And I think it's possible. I think so I guess the answer is it's twofold. Do I want another 1,000 acres at 52? No. But if I had it, I'd try to find another buyer and see, you know, it's another partnership thing. I mean, when you're about scale, it's all about partnerships in this deal. You got to find partners. Go find somebody to buy your beef.
Yeah, the constant refrain of this session, and it smells like truth to me, is that in the final analysis, it's not about cattle, it's about people. And I think there's a whole lot to that in ranching. Hey, Dan, it's been a great conversation with you. Really, I appreciate your willingness to share your experience. You've got a great operation, something really to be proud of. And I know you've worked hard to make all that happen. So best of luck in your future, and I hope that we can stay in touch. And love to get out to Oregon and visit you. If you ever come to the Smokies, let me know. We'll put you up for a night and feed you our version of a steak. For the rest of the folks in the audience, I'm about to hand it back over to Camus. Before I do, I need to say a big thank you to Camus and the great folks at the Good Meat Project. If you don't know about their work, please go to the Good Meat Breakdown and look at all the things that they're doing of value for producers like you and me. And I think you'll find it's a great organization. Feed Camus ideas for additional programs that you'd like to see, and we'll try to get those pulled together for you. It's always a pleasure to work with you, Camus. Back to you.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Dan. That was great. Yeah, I really appreciate the running theme of it's all about community and people as opposed to just making the money, although that is important. So thanks for bringing that in. We're in the process of scheduling out the rest of the Sunday sessions, which are going to run through, I think, August. If any of y'all want us to create a conversation around any particular theme, please feel free to email us at info@goodmeatproject.org. We put you all on an email list once you sign up for a Sunday session. So we'll email you all to let you know what the next ones are and when registration is open. We'll also send recordings to everyone in case you want to watch this again. And I don't think we have any particular resources that we called out here, but if we'll go through the chat, and if anything was mentioned that would be helpful to just share with everyone, we'll send that to you as well. So thanks.
Camus,
Yeah.
Can you post let's post links to Hickory Nut Gap and to Carman, just so that folks can go look at those, and also the Dan's operation. That's just gorgeous cattle and horses there. If you want to see what great looking animals look like, go check out that website.
I'll send everyone those links, and thanks so much for spending a Sunday evening, afternoon with us. We know you're all busy people, so we appreciate you coming, and we hope you'll come again. So thanks everyone for coming, and we'll see you next time.
Bye everybody. See you next time. Thanks again, Dan. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Alex.